One understands a popular conception that holds that technology is contrary to human nature, that we have problems with technology, that there's a threat in technology. But a way of understanding technology, which can be fruitful and constructive, is to recognize that technology is not laid upon us. Technology comes from our desires, just as God and religion has come from our desires. That is, from our desires and our anxieties. At first, not at first, but at one stage in the human race, in some cultures, was the development of the idea of a God to satisfy, to deal with desire and anxiety. In the 18th century in Europe, God was largely replaced, as Nietzsche said, God is dead, replaced by reason, but still science was treated as that institution, or that institutionalization of thought that could deal with desire and anxiety. Now, in looking at technology, it's instructive, I think, to look at the technology of the 19th century, the advent of the steam engine and of the machine, the transformation of heavy materials into steel and so forth. That must have produced a shock to the psyche and also a promise to the individual, the promise of actually realizing the desires that I think are common to the human race. What are those desires? Well, they manifested themselves at the end of the 19th century in an enormous amount, both in America and Europe, of so-called psychic behavior, table rapping, telepathy, ectoplasm, clairvoyance, the apparitions that would appear. And actually, if we look at all of these things, the apparition, clairvoyance, phenomenal memory feats, presences who are from out of space or out of time, telepathy. We look at, they're all models which are actually realized. The desires were expressed then, and they're realized in the technologies of telecommunication, of the transformation of thought, of ideas, of data, of history, of images, and so on, which exist within our present technology. But we have to look at something else in the 19th century, which we inherited, which is also problematic at this time of very high technology, and that is of this binary, this sort of opposition of nature and culture. And it was seen in the 19th century, and goodness knows all that romantic poetry, and indeed romanticism itself, could be seen as a reaction to the idea of the loss of nature, that nature was there and it was being replaced by culture, replaced by technology. Now, nature, it's often forgotten, is a metaphor. Nature never was. There is no nature. There is whatever there is. We've no meta-language to describe what there is. We know that there is a coming into being, that is a feature of the world, that things come into being and evolve and take shape. That's for us in our world. We have no meta-language to describe it. So we can't say that nature exists. We can say that there is a convention that points to certain kinds of relationships that we have with it, but we call it nature. Now we're at a point with our technologies, and certainly conceptually, of, as it were, intervening in what could be called nature, to the extent that we are actually constructing nature with what was seen as its opposition, namely technology. In fact, we're looking at the creation of nature too. We're looking at a partnership with what we choose to call the processes of evolution, a partnership with what we called once nature, in which we intervene, in which we are not simply protecting ourselves from that nature or celebrating the beauties of that nature, but directly in collaboration with those natural processes that will go to constitute the natural world. So it's in that sense that I see no longer a divide between nature and culture. And in that sense also one can talk about the death of art, just as one can talk about the death of nature. That in fact we're looking at nature too, in which those conventions, those rather aspirations that we found in, on the one hand, those practices we call art, and on the other, those celebrations and investigations of what we call nature, converge into what I see as a period really of construction, redefinition, redescription, and essentially of construction of reality. This is why I'm fundamentally optimistic rather than pessimistic about the advances of technology.